committee. Other members of the committee are Councillor John Hobart, Councillor John Kilpatrick. There's also a number of officers and external representatives in attendance. I think we're all aware of the mobile phones and all the rest of it. The main thing is the voting. When the voting will be taken, it will be done by a roll call, and the clerk calls your name. Please confirm whether you wish to vote for, against, or to abstain. Item 1. Is it your wish I confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of November 2020?
I'll second that. I'll second that, Reg.
Yeah, thank you. Right, they're all signed. That's the minute signed. Right, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No.
No.
Item 3, public question time. With no written questions received, and this. I doubt whether there's any public. Agenda item 4, reports of the external auditor, Ernst & Young. Now, is this the one you wanted to do first, or do you want to do something before this, Helen?
No, thank you, Councillor Barry. What I'd like to do is just change the order, if I may, and take item C before I take items A and B, if that's...
Lovely, yeah, go ahead. We'll leave it up to you.
Thank you very much. What I'll do is I'll pause at the end of each item. And firstly, I would like to introduce Jason Jones to the committee. Jason has taken over the manager role from David Wight, who members of the committee will have known for some time. David has been involved in the audit of the council for a number of years. In fact, I think from when he started as a trainee in the Audit Commission back in those days. So we've decided that he probably needs a bit of a break, and Jason's coming in to pick up for the 2021 audit. Also with me is Jack Dunkley, who you will be familiar with. He works on the pension fund. So before I get into the 3 reports that we have on the agenda, just on behalf of EY, can I express our condolences in relation to Councillor Axford. We heard about him not being about his news last week, and he was obviously a chairman while we've been incumbents and supported him. So if I move on to the audit results report, sorry, Councillor Barry.
I'm very sorry what I said earlier about apologies. That was the first I've heard of Councillor Axford's demise. I really apologise to all the members for being flippant. I really didn't realise that he'd died.
That's not a problem, Reg. It's, don't worry about it.
As far as I'm aware, I don't think it was an email sent, right? I haven't.
Yeah, there was.
Well, I'm pretty sorry about that. Shall we move on? Yeah.
Apologies, Councillor Barry. I didn't mean to put you in an awkward spot.
Oh, wow.
So if I just move on to the audit results report, there is no new information in this report that you've received. This is the item that starts on page 69 of the agenda. It summarises the results of the audit that were presented in detail to the November committee meeting. What I did, there were 2 things that I really wanted to bring to the attention of the committee. First, sorry, apologies. Firstly, we haven't yet certified the audit as closed. Members will remember that we had a number of objections to the audit in the summer. We have determined 2 of these objections, and there was a third one that we thought had supported the original objections, but it then it transpires after some correspondence in February that the member of the public involved felt that it was an objection that needed to be considered. It was on the same subject matter as the previous 2, and that is in progress. Of the 2 that we have decided, we determined that the substance of the matters raised by the individuals were by and large very similar in nature to items that had been previously addressed by an auditor in the Audit Commission, and therefore we decided that it was not in the public interest to review the matters again because they were largely of the same issue. This was to do with the income relating to Newport Harbour and whether or not that was being properly applied to the Newport Harbour accounts. So once we have completed our work on this final element of the objection, we will then hopefully be in a position where we can certify the 1920 audit as closed. The other matter that I wanted to bring to the attention of the committee was in Appendix A of the report, and that's from page 102 onwards. That sets out the increases in the fees that have been discussed with the Director of Finance. You'll see there are two elements for both the pension fund and for the council. One relates to a scale fee rebasing, which we also call pricing for quality. So apologies if I swap terminology. This is where, as a firm, we have looked at whether or not the scale fee set by PSAA is a true reflection of the risk associated with the financial statements of both the council and the pension fund, as it's been a number of years since the fees have been reviewed and they are no longer really reflective of risks. We had a good discussion with the Director of Finance, but he felt it was PSAA's responsibility to approve any changes to the base fee for the audit, and so that is something that we have highlighted in our reports. It's not agreed by the Director of Finance and it will go to PSAA for determination. The second element of the fee rebasing in both reports is the additional work that was undertaken in 2019-20 on both the council and the pension fund. That element of the fee has been agreed by the Director of Finance, and again, the next stage in the process is to go to public sector appointments. What I would note is that the fee for the objection that is included within the council's accounts may yet be subject to change because of the additional work that we are carrying out at the moment. That's really all, Chairman, I wanted to say in introduction for the audit results report, but I felt it was important to cover that before we move into the two documents that are looking more into the 2021 audit year. I'll pause there and I'm happy to take any questions from members of the committee.
Has any members got any questions?
Not from me, Reg.
And John? No, thank
me neither. It's just the Newport Harbour issue, and that seems to be resolved. No, I have no questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. In that case, if I can take us back to item A, which is the outline audit plan for the council. I'll briefly introduce it and then ask Jason to just touch on a little more detail. It's a holding document effectively, as at this point we haven't done sufficient planning work for the audit to be able to present a full audit plan to the committee. In particular, the work that we need to do around the value for money conclusion, or the value for money approach, because it's no longer a conclusion, requires more upfront work before we identify the risks, and we need to report that to the committee. Therefore, we've decided to provide you with an update, and we will produce a full plan for the next meeting of this committee. So at this point, Jason, are you happy just to introduce the key elements of the plan?
Yeah, thank you, Ellen, and morning, Chair, and morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Chair, if I could take members to page 21 of the agenda. As Helen mentioned, we've not completed our planning as yet, so the risks that you see in our outline audit plan are largely the same from the prior year. So I don't propose to go through those in much detail, Chair, but I will touch on each one. So the first two you have there is the ones we associate with our fraud risks, and those are mandated by the auditing standards. And we respond to those risks in all of our local government audits. So it's not specific to the council, and you will recognize those from the previous year. The next two, Chair, relate to property valuations and the fact that there are significant balances in the council accounts and subject to estimation techniques and significant assumptions, which are inherently judgmental, and any changes to those assumptions can lead to material changes in value. We have separated those two risks between investment property, which we regard as a significant risk, as those are the valuations are linked to market transactions, which in the current environment is more risky versus the land and buildings property valuations, which are largely valued at depreciated replacement cost. So for land and buildings, we've not classified it as significant, but just higher inherent risk. The next one down is PFI accounting and the potential changes to the highways PFI contract, which were due in 1920, but this was delayed. So we will be on the lookout for any significant changes in 2021 and whether we need to involve our internal specialists. Then moving on to page 22, Chair, the pension liability, which is similar to the one on property valuations in that it's a significant balance in the council's accounts and it's subject to actuarial assumptions, and any changes in those assumptions can lead to material changes in the value. And then lastly, we've got going concern as an area of audit focus. So we agree that the going concern assumption is appropriate for the council, and the council is required to prepare the accounts on the going concern basis. But this risk is more around the disclosures in the accounts and whether the council has disclosed all the relevant information to the users of the accounts relating to the various financial pressures. The auditing standards, the ISO 540 in particular, requires us as the auditors to consider whether any material uncertainties that impact the going concern assumption and whether these are appropriately disclosed in the accounts. So that will be the focus of our work, Chair, but and it's not to question whether the accounts should be prepared on a going concern basis or not, because the code does require the going concern assumption to be used in preparation of the accounts. Any questions on the risks and areas of audit focus so far from anyone before I move on to section 2?
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions for Jason?
None from me.
Not for me either, Carol.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, if we can then move to section 2 on page 24, our value for money. So as Helen mentioned, Jay, the approach is different under the 2020 code. While we still need to consider whether the council has put in place proper arrangements for economy efficiency and effectiveness of its use of resources. Previously, under 2015 code, we provided a conclusion against the overall evaluation criteria. Now, under the 2020 code, we provide commentary through a separate auditor's annual report. Our planning work will involve identifying whether there are any significant weaknesses in the council arrangements against the 3 reporting criteria on page 25. So that's financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. If we identify any significant risk in these arrangements, we will then perform further work in that particular area, and we would then report by exception in our audit report if we're not satisfied with those arrangements. And then page 26 sets out the sources of information we'll use to identify any weaknesses in council's arrangements. And these have not changed. It's the same sources of information we would use in previous years. It's just how we then direct our work and how we report on those areas. We do set out the summary of the key changes from page 28, Chair. That's all I really wanted to mention on that, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Tell me, when it comes to value for money, if the council's disposing on an asset, say land, is it hard and fast that they must go for the highest amount of money they can raise on that? Or are there other considerations they can take and it would still be lawful as a disposal under value for money?
I don't. Oh, Ellen, do you want?
I was going to say it's a really interesting question, Chair. I think I would want to go away and double check the guidance behind it, because I'm not sure that I've looked into that level of detail in a little while. So I wouldn't want to say anything that I could get wrong.
It's something that does come up often, that the council's either sold, disposed of something cheap, but then by disposing of it cheaper, they've put more into the community and done more community, the value that can't be seen is quite high. But does it have to be? That's what's always puzzled me. Does it have to be hard cash?
So in the terms of what we cover under the value for money assessment, we're unlikely to comment specifically at that level of detail. I don't know if officers may be able to answer your question more in a more informed way than I feel I can right at the moment, if that's okay. I don't know if either Kerry or Joe or one of the other officers on the call may be able to help out here.
Apparently not.
We're all desperately going to have to go and look at the guidance, Chair.
Have any other members got a question for Jason?
No, I'm happy with what I've heard so far.
Thank you.
Happy to.
Okay, thank you very much. So shall I take us on to the third item, which is the more comprehensive audit plan for the Isle of Wight Pension Fund. In this instance, we have been able to complete our planning and we don't have the complication of the new value for money code, which does make life a bit simpler. And just to touch on that value for money side of things, the reporting this year will look quite different when on the council side, but not for the pension fund. So, Jack, are you happy to take the members through briefly the report?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. So I just want to briefly take you through the risks and then touch on our materiality for this year as well. So our risks start on page 43 of the reporting pack. So this is our first risk, which is the risk of fraud or error due to management override of control. So it's a risk that we're required to recognise as part of ISA 240. And ISA 240 also prescribes the procedures that we need to perform in response to that risk. So we've listed out those procedures on the page, but essentially we'll be looking at significant and unusual transactions. We're also looking at significant estimates in the accounts and also performing our journal entry testing. Our second risk is then on page 44. So this is the risk of fraud in revenue recognition through the manipulation of investment income. So again, it's a prescribed risk in ISA 240 and a risk that we've recognised in previous years as well. Again, we've listed out the procedures that we plan to perform in response to that risk on the page. But essentially what we're looking at is a reconciliation between the fund manager's report, the custodian's report, and the pension fund accounts, and also looking at any significant investment income journals posted during the close down process. And then our third and final significant risk is on page 45. So this year, the pension fund has made a material investment in private debt, and this is the first time the pension fund has invested in level 3 assets. So level 3 assets aren't quoted on an open market, which makes their valuation more complex. And because of that reason, we've recognised it as a significant risk this year. And again, we've listed out the procedures we plan to perform in response to this risk. And this will be primarily looking at the last audited accounts of the private debt fund, as that will essentially provide us with confirmation over the valuation of the investment. And then if the balance sheet date for the private debt fund isn't coterminous with the pension fund accounts balance sheet date, we'll also be looking at any roll forward between the two dates and perform an analytical procedure on that valuation movement. And the final thing that we'll be looking at is the fund manager's auditor's controls report, and just looking for any issues that have been flagged in controls in that report, primarily focused on any pricing issues. So that's it in terms of our significant risks. And then we've also got an area of audit focus this year. So that's on page 46. And this is just to reflect the change in standard on going concern. So the same kind of risk as the council. So the revised standard requires us to perform additional procedures on management's going concern assessment. But actually, due to the advent of COVID-19, we performed the majority of those procedures in the previous years. So we're not expecting our work to increase significantly this year. But obviously, we'll hold a kind of detailed discussion with management just to go through the work and paper requirements we have for year end to go through that assessment. And then the last thing I just wanted to flag was just on page 48. So you'll see that our materiality has dropped quite significantly compared to the previous year. That's solely due to a change in our internal guidance on setting materiality for pension funds, and it's not due to an increased risk that we're seeing in the pension fund. So that is all I really want to pull out in the report, and kind of happy to take any questions.
I've got a question. When the council decided to invest in private debt, did Ernst & Young advise them on the risk, or did they ask for Ernst & Young's advice on the risk?
So no, so it's not. So it wouldn't be our responsibility to provide that advice, because we give independent assurance on the account. So it would actually be a conflict of interest for us to provide advice on any investment decision.
So the council takes the risk, and then you audit the risk after they've taken the risk.
Effectively, in this instance, but the council will have taken its own advice, Chair, I am sure, before entering into any transactions, which is why you have the investment advisors and a separate panel for pension funds. When it comes to, you have been relatively unusual as a council and a pension fund in not having level 3 assets. You've taken a very prudent approach, I would say, in the past. So I think it's probably a step towards what the majority of other pension funds are doing. But yes, if we were involved in the decision-making process, we are then not sufficiently independent to provide the assurance afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Have any other members got a question for Jack?
No, thank you.
John?
No, thank you.
What is this? Noted. This one. Does the committee note the report? We don't have to make a decision on this. This is for note. Thank you.
Yeah, I've noted it.
Yeah. Thank you, Ellen, Jason and Jack.
Thank you very much, Chair.
We'll now move on to item 5, Treasury Management Strategy Statement 21-22 to adopt the Treasury Management Strategy. I think that's Joe. Is it Joe?
Yes, Chairman, it is me. Thank you very much. Could I just point out to members that unfortunately the way that the papers were published is back to front. So the covering report is actually presented as the appendix, and the strategy itself is presented as the main report. So if I could take members to page 131 of the pack, which is the covering report. Effectively, this is the annual Treasury management strategy that the Council is required to set to enable it to manage its Treasury management risks and the borrowing and investment strategies. The report is in the same format as it has been in previous years, and all of the numbers contained therein are reflective of the items covered in the Council's main budget, which was approved by full Council at the end of February. There's no significant changes proposed to the strategy for this coming financial year, and I'm very happy to take any questions that members may have on the report as it stands.
Are there any questions for Joe?
No, not from me, Reg.
Right. So we'll move to the vote. Lottie will now take the vote. The vote is that the committee adopt the Treasury Management Strategy Statement for 21-22.
Sorry.
4. Wait a minute. No, there's only 3 there.
Councillor Hobart.
Councillor Hobart.
4.
Councillor Kilpatrick.
Councillor
4.
Right, thank you very much. That's carried. Right, item 6. To approve the report of the Assistant Chief Executive and Chief Strategy Officer. The committee are asked to approve the strategic risks of the Council as set out in paragraph 11 and Appendix 1. Thank you. Who's doing this? Joe again? No, it's not. It's
Debbie.
Sorry, yes, risk.
Thank you, Chair. This is the 4th update throughout 2020-2021, and it represents the position as at February 21. The changes within the strategic risk register and the strategic profile have been confirmed through CMT, and it reflects the current setup of the corporate plan. The strategic risk summary, so that is to start at page 137. Okay, so what I propose to do, Chair, is to just take you through the strategic risk summary document, which is a summary of the full register, which is held at the end of this paper. I'm just going to swap documents now, just 1 second. Okay. So first of all, I need to admit to a typo in relation to the top line. So when you see where the scores are, you'll see that on your version of the paper, the score says February 2020. That's actually February 2021 and is the current score. So apologies for that. The first risk 1, is obviously the lack of financial resource and the ability to deliver the council's in-year budget strategies for 2021. There's been a slight change in score on this one as it's improved from the previous quarter. And at the end of Q3, we're currently forecasting a shortfall of around 7 million in income for the year, based on estimates of the impact of COVID-19. The shortfall has been accounted for in forecasts for the 2021 outturn. I'll just keep going, Chair, unless there's any questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So risk 2 is a lack of financial resource and the ability to deliver the council's medium-term financial strategy. As you're aware, the budget process for 2021 and 2022 commenced right back in July, and the budget will be set at full council, or was set at full council on the 24th of February 2021. There's been no change in score with this particular risk. And again, pandemic pressures have been identified and referred to in the full appendix at the end of the report. Risk number 3 is insufficient staffing, capacity and skills, and this remains on amber. Based at the February meetings around this particular risk, you'll see that within there also is a reference to the fact that staff are getting very tired now, those particularly that have been on response work for 12 months now are really quite tired. And I think that if we looked at this next month or the month after, then the score would probably now be turning red in relation to people's capacity to carry on doing what they're doing. In relation to that, the mitigation that's been brought in is there's a lot more focus on health and well-being and supporting colleagues who might be struggling at this point in time. And work has started in relation to what the council's roadmap looks like for returning to work and reopening some of those services that have been currently closed. In terms of risk 4, this is a green risk. This is about organisational culture, and I think the last 12 months is evidence that the council works together in relation to how it meets the current needs of its population and the culture of the organisation, Team IWC being a key leader in that one. Risk 5 is failure to improve educational attainment. The score hasn't changed on this one. Attendance on the Isle of Wight has been higher than nationally during the first half term of the year, and then of course we went back into lockdown. Most schools going back this particular week and last week. School improvement teams increasingly focused on supporting educational attainment within the current climate, and the secondary school improvement team is continuing with planned programmes of support that have been flexed in light of the absences during the 2019 attainment data. It's going to be quite tricky to work out how any schools are actually meeting their requirements around this when the exams are in the setup that they are. Still worth noting that almost 74% of schools are currently rated good or outstanding, and signs from inspections undertaken is that they will improve over the coming months once the off-test inspections and the current suspension due to 19 pandemic comes away. Risk 6 is failure to identify and manage situations where there are vulnerable children who are subject to abuse. The score has remained the same, and the service is fully operational and continues to operate as near to normal as possible. Obviously, this is one of the services that couldn't close and continued to work as it was. Risk 7 is failure to recruit acceptable quality of professional practice, and that's mainly around adult social care and housing needs department. The scores remain the same, but the past 3 months have seen an overall reduction in the number of vacancies, improved retention and time in the hire of candidates. So where those vacancies have appeared, the turnaround time for getting new people in post has improved. And there's a rolling advertisement campaign that's proving to be successful in relation to maintaining those grow your own social work programmes. Risk 8 is failure to identify and effectively manage situations where vulnerable adults are subject to abuse. And again, scores remained the same. All adult social care staff continue to focus on protecting the vulnerable adults in the island communities. And they've also reintroduced a regular provider forum to ensure that peer support is also accessible across the sector. Risk 9, failure to secure the required outcomes from the integrated adult social care and health partnership. Score on that again remains the same, it remains as 12. There's a lack of clarity around the ongoing funding available in relation to discharge to assess, which is one of the most integrated areas of work at the moment. There's a focus on improving and maintaining the hospital flow, and that's driven a number of process changes as clearer and more consistent data has been able to be provided to give that an evidence-based approach in relation to those changes and process changes. Risk 10, adult social care provider failure. Obviously, the continued impact of COVID-19 and the increasing COVID-19 positive cases that we have had was felt across the whole internal and external departments to support those people. The position is improving with workforce shortages that have been mitigated through staff redeployment internally and with support through to external providers of home care and home-based care. There's been quite a lot of support ongoing through the community cell in relation to that provider support, and that continues even though we're coming out of response and into recovery. 11A is failure of the Highways PFA contract. This is again stable at 8 amber. The savings programme has been established and agreed with Island Roads, and reports are made to dedicated savings board in relation to maintaining and achieving those. Discussions are ongoing between the service provider and the council to facilitate the completion of the core investment period of the contract, and that's what's often referred to as milestone 14. That's also tracked through the members' strategic programme board and reports directly to the leader. 11B, failure of the waste contract resulted in significant financial and operational disruption. Again, has remained stable, remains at amber. Performance is currently good, with almost 100% of the municipal waste now being diverted from landfill and over 56% of household waste being recycled or composted. That's a good news story. In relation to risk 12, Brexit, this will be removed from the strategic risk register going forward. I think the good news on this one was none of the concerns that we had really materialised for the island. It was well managed and well supported throughout. Brexit risk management and response post-transition will come together as part of the post-COVID recovery plan that's being run by Chris Ashman. So it won't stand alone, but it will of course feature in that recovery programme going forward. Risk 13, achieving the vision for the island. Again, the same plan, the response recovery plan was presented to Cabinet back in September, based around 3 main pillars about community recovery, economic recovery and place recovery. Those meetings were stalled post-Christmas because obviously we went back into response mode, and those have picked back up now, and the plan will be refreshed in light of the current roadmap. Risk 14, additional demands placed upon the council and partners owing to the pandemic. The pandemic flu plan provides a framework for the council's response. This also is reflected in the outbreak plan, which is currently being refreshed in light of changes around the government's roadmap and moving again out of response and into recovery. There's an additional risk that's currently being developed that will manage the long-term impact of COVID, and that we're hoping will be in the next report. That's been put together by Simon Bryant, from the Director of Public Health. That is the end of the summary of risks. Are there any questions, Chair?
Are there any questions for Debbie?
Not from me, Reg.
I have no questions.
So
Thank you.
the recommendation is to approve the strategic risks of the council as set out in paragraph 10 and Appendix 1. I have a proposer and seconder, please.
I'll propose Reg Kilpatrick.
I'll second it.
Thank you, John. And now the clerk will take the vote. Councillor Barry, 4. Councillor Hobart,
4.
4. He was 4 too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
We've got to approve the internal audit plan for 2021.
Good morning, all. Elizabeth Goodwin. Chair, if I may.
Elizabeth?
Good morning. The previous year's plan, i.e. the one that we are currently in, which is 2021, we have kept reasonably fluid because we needed to flex in relation to COVID-19. It's envisaged that the plan in front of you, we will have the same type of approach, i.e. as risk exposure develops or materialises, or in actual fact just changes and dilutes, that I will make amendments potentially to the plan as we go through. So it is to bring to you a plan for 2021. You will note from page 177 onwards, it is a breakdown of the various directorates and the audits, and whether the audit is a full audit or whether it is a follow-up audit. All audits work that we undertake has to be aligned to the strategic risks and to the organisation's priorities, and that is contained within the N2 columns. So, Chair, beyond that, I wasn't going to go any further, and I'm happy to take any questions. I will be reviewing the plan on a regular basis, and any amendments, any additional audits coming onto the table or any items coming out, I will bring back to this committee as and when that occurs. It is envisaged that the COVID assurance work will continue into the next year, and it's also envisaged that will be an increase in the number of grants as well that we have. This plan was formulated in consultation with all relevant senior managers and with yourself, Chair, and with other relevant players.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Are there any questions for Elizabeth?
No question.
No questions from me, Reg.
Thank you. We note the report.
Yeah, there's it.
They're approved. Yeah, oh, it's approved. Next one's no. Approved. Do we approve it?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
We're going to do the vote to make it official.
Okay.
Councillor Barry.
4.
Councillor Hobart.
4.
Councillor Kilpatrick.
4.
4. There should now be a 10-minute break. And after that, there's just one item, apart from members' question time. So is it your wish that we carry on now and do this last item?
Yes, please, Reg.
Yes, yes, from me, Reg, as well.
Right. So we'll carry on then.
Yeah.
This is to note this is the chief. This is a report. Sorry, this is a report of the internal chief auditor.
Progress report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. The audit report that is in front of you is our regular progress report from page 190 onwards, and which is section 6. It denotes the progress in relation to the activities that we had on the table. Or at the end of the year, we would have covered in the region of 53 items, and you can see the progress and the position that they're in. There are a couple of audits which are in section 7 from 191 onwards, where there are some high risks contained within the reviews. That's under children disability, public health funerals, and on page 193, deputyship and appointeeship. Just for information, the public health funerals, because there were a number of high risks, and in actual fact this relates to an item of work that we conducted during the previous financial year, but were unable to close due to client staff being unavailable due to the pandemic. We've been able to undertake a follow-up on that particular review, which is detailed on page 203, and that shows that although there was high risks initially raised, some of those there has been work in progress. The two mediums have closed down, but we've been able to improve the overall assurance level from a limited to a reasonable. Within the main body of this report, you can also see some of the COVID assurance work that we've been undertaking, which was outside of the audit plan, and that starts on page 194. Where we have the income loss compensation claim, the additional dedicated home to school, college grants and so forth, the infection control grants. From section 8 onwards is the update on any follow-up work that we've commenced, where we've agreed that we would perform a review to ascertain the implementation status of agreed actions. So from page 197 onwards, you can see as to whether the actions have been implemented and the new assurance level. You should note that there's been progress in all areas despite COVID, and some obviously impacts on staff. And finally, we have in section 9 just an overall update in relation to the whole of the plan with what is outstanding and the various assurance levels that have been attributed at the conclusion of the audit. Chair, I wasn't going to go beyond that. I am more than happy to answer any questions anybody may have regarding the contents of this report.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Are there any questions for Elizabeth?
Not from me, Chair.
Not for me, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the committee notes the report but, and the update. So,
That's noted.
Noted, yeah.
thank you very much, Elizabeth. We move on to agenda item 14, members' question time. There's been no written questions received. Has anybody got a question? No.
Not from me, Chair.
Well, thank you all for attending, and I might see you next year.
Yeah.
You sure you won't be seeing me?
No, I don't think they'll see me either.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Everybody, and I'll close.
Thanks a lot, Chair. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye, everybody.